Olá, meu nome é Lucas Carvalho, eu sou repórter do Tilt, o canal de tecnologia do UOL, e a gente está aqui para uma entrevista com o Joe Toscano. Você deve conhecer ele por aquele documentário O Dilema das Redes, que deixou todo mundo de cabelo em pé sobre os perigos das redes sociais. Mas o Joe também é ex-consultor de design do Google, fundador da Beacon e autor de um livro chamado Automating Humanity, sobre automação da humanidade através de design e algoritmos. Joe, thank you for this interview.
Yeah, thank you all for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Great. So I'm going to start this interview by asking, how did the social dilemma impact the way people use social media, the way the people you know use social media? Do you see that the documentary made people use less social media? In your perspective, do more people talk to you about it? Search for you to get questions about it?
So I think the results are still somewhat to be determined, but I do believe that it has impacted people's use of different social media platforms, especially Facebook and Instagram. I know, for example, that Facebook made a public statement trying to discredit the film, which a company that's that big doesn't make a public statement about something unless it's causing them a lot of problems. And so we assume that probably what was happening was a lot of people started to delete Facebook or Facebook and Instagram and everything else. So that's our assumption, but we don't know, for sure how many or what number that is, because obviously Facebook doesn't want to share those numbers. But the outreach has been incredible. A lot of people all around the world have been emailing me, messaging me on LinkedIn, everywhere, about how it made them reconsider their relationship with others, which I think is a really important thing. We have gotten so lost in our phones for the last decade that we've forgotten about our relationships with other people in real life. And I think that it also has caused a lot of discussion about that. Overall, I would say that the success of the film has been great. I know our film team is very happy. We did expect it to be successful, but there's no way we could have imagined this successful,
Yeah. We are celebrating 25 years of internet here in Brazil. But after watching The Social Dilemma, a lot of people question if there is reason to celebrate. Do you think there's reason to celebrate the anniversary of the internet? Or do you think that we should just throw it all out, start over, and it's gone terribly wrong? What's your opinion about that?
No, I definitely don't. I do wish that the film would have discussed the positives of the internet a bit more. I think it did a great job in informing the public about things that they maybe never even considered before. But for example, the research that they showed about the suicides and the depression and those other things, that same research also showed that if you were to use social media in moderation, I believe the numbers are like 10 to 30 minutes a day, then actually social media becomes a benefit to your life and it improves your quality of life. And there's also other research around other similar things within the movie that show in moderation, a lot of this is good. Beyond that, we have to consider all of the benefits that we have through the internet and the potential benefits in the future. Automation is going to clear up the ability for us to really focus on the most meaningful aspects of work. Self-driving cars, different automated vehicles and transportation will allow a whole new generation of people who never could have had access to a vehicle to continue to be mobile. You're talking about children who can't drive cars. You're talking about older people who lose their keys because they can't see anymore. There's people with disabilities who need help getting around. Same goes for medical field. Eventually, well, not even eventually, right now with the COVID vaccine, there's a lot of AI being used in the research to help speed up the process. And that's why we're seeing vaccines faster than ever before, because this can be done with computers rather than pencil and paper. And so I think I hope what everyone takes away from this is that I believe that overwhelmingly the internet has done good for society. But what I hope that they found out in the film is that there are fundamental things that we need to fix. And that's what the whole point of the film is, really. It's not to say get rid of the internet. It's to say we need to rethink about how we're using it.
So you are a former design consultant for Google. And here in Brazil, a lot of people think that working for Google is a dream job, but you have said that it's not a dream job because people are actually already working for Google, but for free.
Yeah.
I'd like you to elaborate a little bit about that, or what do you mean by Google having us working for them for free?
Yeah, no, I'm glad you guys got to check out my TED Talk. So yeah, the whole idea behind it, first of all, I want to say for many people, Google is a dream job. I do also believe that Google, for the most part, treats its employees well. There are obviously problems, but there's problems with every employer, right? It's just, who do you want to work for? What I talked about in my TEDx is actually about data usage and how we are all effectively working for Google and every other company that collects data on us. A lot of my work is focused on data protection and privacy and data rights on the internet. And I fundamentally believe that data is a modern day currency that, for the most part, our governments don't recognize. And so the whole point of my talk was to say, hey, look, we are building these companies, right? Because think of this, if you were to use Google Maps right now, and we were to take away all of the data that was not created by a Google employee, there wouldn't be much there, right? Think about what would happen if Google had to rebuild Google Maps with only paid employees, right? It wouldn't exist. And so the real problem is that we are all working by building data, by taking pictures of restaurants, by leaving reviews, by pinning locations. And the same goes for many other companies, you know, so it should not just Google. But think about it this way. If I had 1 billion or 2 billion people working for me for free, I could be a trillionaire too, right? That's the problem. We need to decentralize that wealth, because effectively what I believe is happening is modern day slavery. We are building these companies for them by training by creating data that then trains their algorithms and builds their systems. And we're not seeing a penny out of it. And what that's doing is it's extracting productive labor from the economy and turning it into money, where the wealth is only going to those who have owned the system.
I understand. But you worked for Google as a consultant. So I want to understand, at what point did you decide that you wanted to leave? Well, what happened there that you looked at and you said, look, I can't keep working here because of this? And how did you start Beacon after that?
Yeah, so there were several things throughout my experience that made me take notice of what was going on and decide maybe I can do this better somewhere else. Ultimately, one of the things that sticks in my mind the most was I was doing some work with their internal team of user experience researchers and helping them define questions so they could run research on some of their products. And when I reviewed the questions and the way that the research was set up, I went to my boss and I said, there's a lot of things in here that are not being done properly. So I have a data science background. I was a researcher in college, which is very different than a lot of designers. A lot of designers are artists or, you know, something like that. I'm a very technical designer. And so anyway, I went and I talked to my boss and I said, hey, I think we need to have them ask these questions differently. I think they should run this experiment differently and things like that. Because if this were to go to like an IRB, a review board, it wouldn't pass legally. And now there's no regulations against what they're doing. Let me say that, okay? There is no review board for the industry. That's only for university and like accredited science. But I think there should be. And because I saw these practices that were, would literally be called unethical, I went and talked to my boss and I said, hey, I think we need to talk to them about this. And point blank, my boss at the time looked at me and said, hey, look, this is a big account for us. And I understand what you're saying, but we don't have the power to push back on this. And he said basically everything except go do your job and just quit whining,
Yeah.
and so I kept working. I didn't go quit that day, but I monitored it and I kept watching, and I hit a breaking point eventually where I said, I just can't do this anymore. I think it needs to be fixed. And I think that I can go make change outside of the company faster than I can inside of the company. And so I took the leap. How did I get to where I am today? Was when I took that leap, I left my job. I broke my lease in my house. So I didn't have any home. I sold almost everything I own, including like my stocks, all my stocks in tech companies. And I just lived out of my car, traveling literally the world, talking about these issues anywhere that would take me. And over time, my audiences grew bigger and bigger, and my reach was farther and farther. I have spent the last almost 4 years now talking about these issues all across the world, 4 different continents, many different states and nations, universities, which is my organization. And I do a lot of different work across a bunch of different places. I'm helping create laws right now. I'm helping create the future of the internet and in product. And I love what I'm doing. I love my life. There are definitely struggles, just like any entrepreneur, but I have never been happier with my overall life,
So, Joe, you left Google because you hit this breaking point, and now you travel the world with Beacon and with your talks and talking about the problems we have with the internet and social media. So how do we fix this exactly? Because I don't think the movie gives us a specific answer.
Yeah.
We can break up big tech companies. We can make laws that stop them from taking so much data from us, or we can educate people to use social media less.
Yeah.
What's the fix here? How can we fix it? And who's to blame about it?
Yeah. Well, I think the biggest problem is that we want one thing, one answer to that question, and we want one definition of who's to blame. And the real problem is that this is a system problem. In the free market, as it goes, we have the corporate world, we have the legal or government world, and we have the consumer market. These 3 pillars work together. I personally think we do need some regulation, but not a lot. I guess I'm very American on that side of it. I don't believe in regulation a lot. I think there are some basic things that we need to put into law. But then other than that, I just think we need to start building new companies. There are plenty of them that are trying right now. I think what we're going to see over time is that the Facebooks, the Googles, the Twitter, Amazons, they are too big to actually innovate anymore. They don't pivot like a startup. And while they will make changes, I think they're not going to be fast enough to keep up with a new era of companies who are going to build their product in a way that actually respects the customer. And I think that's what we're going to see as a paradigm shift in business practices. I mostly say that because that's historically how it's always happened, right? I see Google as like IBM of the future, right? IBM used to be one of the biggest computer companies in the United States, in the world. Right now, IBM is still a very big, profitable, successful company, but the general public doesn't really know much about them anymore. I could see that happening to Google. I don't think Google's ever going to go away. I think that they will change, but it will be slow. And I think there will be other companies that come up around them because they're too slow to move, because the government's going after them and causing a bunch of legal, problems. And same with Facebook. I think, to be honest, I think Facebook's going to fail eventually. I think somebody's going to take over. I mean, Snapchat almost did it. TikTok's giving them a run for their money. This is what the problem is Facebook doesn't actually have like productive value in society. Google does. Google has a lot of, they are the infrastructure for the digital world. Facebook's just a platform that we talk on, so yeah, I think naturally I believe it will work out, but the reality of it is we all need to start working to make that happen, right?
Yeah, you talk about coming up of new platforms and companies that can make the market a little less stalled about this. But when we look at what actually happened, TikTok came along, and then the United States banned it from the US, and TikTok came along. I mean, Snapchat came along, and Facebook started copying everything that it does on its apps, and Instagram stories are bigger than Snapchat right now. So how do you really believe that that's the only, not the only way, but one of the main ways? Or is there something that we can do to stop these big companies from, having this predatory behavior in the market?
I don't necessarily. I mean, I have submitted evidence to the attorneys general across the United States to discuss antitrust. That's monopoly break up monopolies. I have submitted evidence for those cases. I do believe that there is a case to be made legally against these companies for monopoly behavior. But ultimately, if you look at the history of monopoly and monopoly law, what ends up happening is typically the monopoly gets broken up into a bunch of smaller subsidiaries, and then they work together as if they were one company and end up just coming back together over time, worth a lot more than they were originally. And so I don't really believe in monopoly law. I hope that the case gets brought to court. I hope that they take action, but I believe that it comes down to market innovation. The examples you gave with Snapchat, for example, Snapchat happened a while ago. I don't know when Snapchat actually was started, but it was the early 2010s. And that was a point in history to which, we weren't aware of all, or at least the government wasn't aware of everything that was happening. TikTok got banned, but that's not because of TikTok. That's because it was a Chinese company and it's a national security threat to the United States. And I do believe that. But there, you can see how fast TikTok grew. Also, if you look at any of the numbers about Facebook proper, the blue site, they have been losing millions of users a year, like a lot of users, for the last 3 or 4 years. Facebook knows that Facebook proper, the blue site, is going to die. That's why they pushed us all onto Facebook Messenger. That's why they have Instagram as the next place that we will go. Facebook, as we know it, is simply an old phone book, really, at this point. It's just a way to manage all of our contacts. And that's why we moved to Messenger, because it's just a phone book. And so, yeah, I think that Facebook will slowly deflate. Facebook relies on the fact that the cool kids are using it. And let's be honest, the cool kids are leaving. They're going to TikTok. They're going to, I don't even know, because I'm not a cool kid anymore. You know what I'm saying? I'm an old man at this point. I'm 31. So I don't really even use social media. But I do believe the only reason Facebook and Instagram are kind of alive still is because the younger generation is only there to keep in touch with their family. Over time, the generational shift, I think that Facebook will disappear. But we'll see. Maybe not.
Yeah, we never know. Thinking about the future now, I have a question here from Stefania Riccioli, which is one of our readers, and she asked, our data is already everywhere. We can't do anything about it, according to her. And how do you protect the next generation, the future generations that we already have, baby profiles on social media? They're already having their data being poured out by their parents on social media. How do we protect them?
So there's a lot of things that I'm working on with the government here to discuss those issues, some of which I can talk about, some of which I cannot. I think a big thing that everyone needs to remember is that data is not valuable forever. Sorry, nose itches.
Okay.
Data, for example, if we stop giving, and this is dramatic, this is like not real, but I'm just going to give a simple example. If we stopped giving our data to Google right now, Google would have 10 to 20 years worth of data on all of us, right? But in 2, 3, maybe 5 years, there would be a lot of that data that would be old and irrelevant, right? We change as people. We change where we live. We change our phone numbers. We change this, we change that. And then data needs to be updated. So if it's not regularly updated, it becomes less valuable. And so there's also, when we're talking about room for innovation, that's how I think that shift can happen as well. Is, yeah, I'm on Facebook, and I'm on Facebook, but I don't update my stuff anymore. I don't add to Facebook. Facebook's not getting directly from me, not getting a lot of new data. And if those supply chains start to cut off, those companies will fall off because the value won't be there like they used to be when everything was fresh. So the reality of it is, this is going to take a long time. Okay, this shift is going to, at a minimum, take us 5 to 10 years, probably closer to 20. But I think what we're going to do is we're going to go through a series of events, generational shifts, kind of like the Great Depression. For example, in the United States, like my grandpa went through the Great Depression and he never trusted banks again. He wanted to hide his money in his bed or in a safe or in things like that. I think we are going to have a whole generation of people between 25 and 45 years old who grew up with the internet and have gone through this period that we're in right now. And they say, I'm not going to let my kids go through that. I'm not going to go through that. So you're going to have a whole generational shift of people who are more educated and more aware and looking for better options. And so I think it's realistically a 20 or 30 year timeline. I think we will see major changes in the next 3 to 5 years that we didn't expect before. But I think it's at a minimum 10 to 20 years before we're like into that generational shift. But I do believe it's happening. I wouldn't have left the company if I thought it was impossible to change. So I hope people do have hope in this conversation. The world is always changing, and we can be the ones who change it.
That's great. So Joe, thank you very much. I think we have it. You gave us 30 minutes, so I'm not going to take much more of your time. I know you're a busy man.
Yeah,
if you want to add up anything to this interview that I haven't asked, but you think it's important to make clear?
Sure. Yeah. Well, first of all, thanks for having me. I love Brazil. As we talked about before we got on, I've been there many times. I love the people down there. So thanks for having me and giving me the opportunity. I think for everyone on the call, everyone listening, if you want help, first of all, you can go to our website, beacontrustnetwork.com, and there are a lot of resources for you. And there will be many more coming over the next few months as we update things. Also, sign up for our email list. We're pretty quiet. We only send one email a month, but it should be very valuable. And lastly, if you want to directly connect with me, you can find me on LinkedIn. I am on every other social media, but as we just discussed, I don't really use them. So if you want to directly connect to me, the best place is LinkedIn. Yeah, other than that, I guess just thank you for having me, and hopefully we'll talk soon.
Sure.
Yeah.
Thank you very much, Joe.
Yeah, see y'all.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Wow.